Listen up. Put down your coffee and look this brutal reality in the eye. Since the end of World War II, the West, led by the US and its European allies, has pumped trillions of dollars into what they call development aid for Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. That is a number so big you could buy Apple, Microsoft, and probably throw in Tesla as chump change. But the result? A big, fat zero. Or worse, a mess. In many places, poverty hasn't just lingered, it's mutated into dependency, corruption, and massive white elephant projects gathering dust in the desert. Have you ever asked yourself why Elon Musk can land a Falcon 9 rocket on a barge in the middle of the ocean with centimeter-level precision, but the UN and the World Bank can't guarantee a kid in Kenya gets a measles vaccine or a mosquito net? Why can we optimize the TikTok algorithm to keep your eyeballs glued to the screen for 3 hours, but we're clueless when it comes to convincing Indian farmers to use fertilizer correctly so they don't starve? The answer isn't a lack of money or a lack of heart, it's arrogance. The arrogance of guys in Armani suits sitting in air-conditioned rooms in Davos, Switzerland, drawing up grand plans on whiteboards without ever stepping foot in the mud of reality. They act on intuition, on dusty 20th century economic theories, believing that if you just dump a massive bucket of cash on a problem, what economists call the big push, it will solve itself. That is 1960s thinking, and let's be real, it failed miserably.
Enter Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Kramer. In 2019, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences gave the Nobel Prize in Economics to this trio. And believe me, this wasn't an award for sleepy academic theories about interest rates or inflation that you see on CNBC. This was a slap in the face to the old-school policy elites. Banerjee, Duflo, and Kramer are like surgeons walking into a room full of quack doctors who are prescribing herbs based on vibes. They said, stop guessing, prove it. They brought the mindset of Silicon Valley and Big Pharma into development economics. Think about how Pfizer or Moderna make vaccines. They don't just mix a potion, ship it, and hope nobody dies. They run randomized controlled trials, RCTs. They split patients into 2 groups. One gets the drug, one gets a placebo. Then they ruthlessly compare the data to see if the drug actually works.
Banerjee, Duflo, and Kremer asked, why do we demand that level of rigor for a headache pill but accept total negligence when deciding the fate of billions of poor people? They didn't sit at Harvard or MIT drawing charts. They rolled up their sleeves and went to the most remote villages in India, the driest rural areas in Kenya. They didn't try to solve poverty with a capital P as an abstract concept. They tore that monster apart into manageable chunks. Instead of asking, how do we make this country rich, they asked, how do we get teachers to actually show up for class? Or why won't farmers buy crop insurance even when it's dirt cheap? Or is it more effective to give away mosquito nets or sell them for $1? Their approach is exactly how Google or Facebook runs A/B testing on their user interface. You change one small variable, measure the result, and repeat. No room for romance or fake moral speeches, just data. And data doesn't lie. The shocking event here isn't that they found a magic formula to turn poor into rich overnight. The shock is that they proved that almost everything we thought we knew about the poor was dead wrong. We, living in developed cities, look at the poor with prejudice, assuming they're lazy, ignorant, or make irrational decisions. But this Nobel trio flipped the script, showing that the poor are actually incredibly sophisticated economic managers. They have to calculate every penny in an environment 1,000 times riskier than a Wall Street broker's. If you screw up in the stock market, you lose your year-end bonus. If they screw up, their kids don't eat dinner tonight. 2019 wasn't just a year honoring 3 people. It was the death knell of the era of empty promises in international aid. It opened the era of evidence-based economics, where every dollar spent must be measured by its actual impact on human life, not by the thickness of an annual report.
But the story doesn't end there. To understand why this method is so powerful, it shook the World Bank and billion-dollar NGOs to their core. We need to dissect the machine they built. We need to go deep into the mechanics of RCTs and economics and see how they hacked human behavior to uncover naked truths that no computer model could predict. And trust me, what they found about education, healthcare, and microcredit will make you question the entire welfare system you're paying taxes to support. Buckle up, because we're about to step into the laboratory of real life, where the guinea pigs are humans, and the prize isn't cheese, it's survival.
Now, let's leave the boardrooms and fly straight to Udaipur, a dusty rural region in Rajasthan, India. This is where Banerjee and Duflo conducted one of their most iconic experiments, one that ripped apart every preconceived notion held by desk-bound policymakers. The issue was immunization.
Sounds simple, right? Vaccines save lives, they are free, funded by the government and charities, and mothers here love their children. According to the logic of classical economics, the stuff you learn in Econ 101, the vaccination rate should be 100%. If something has a huge benefit and zero cost, a rational agent will sprint to get it. But the reality? The full immunization rate in this region was pathetically low, under 5%. Why? The experts sitting in Geneva or Washington started throwing around macro hypotheses. They said the people are superstitious, they resist Western science, or they don't care about health. They blamed culture, religion, lack of education. If you listen to these experts, the solution would be to spend millions on massive educational propaganda campaigns to change mindsets.
But Banerjee and Duflo didn't buy that cliches. They looked at the problem through the lens of micro and human behavior. They realized a naked truth that everyone experiences but few admit: procrastination. Imagine you are a poor mother in Udaipur. To get your kid vaccinated, you have to walk miles on dirt roads under a scorching sun to reach a health center. When you get there, the center might be closed because the nurse skipped work, a real problem, or they're out of stock. You lose a day's wages, which means losing dinner for nothing. In return, what's the benefit of the vaccine? Your child might not get measles in some distant future. Humans, whether a Silicon Valley CEO or an Indian farmer, tend to overestimate current costs, the walk, the lost income, and underestimate future benefits. It's exactly like knowing the gym is good for you, but it's raining today and Netflix just dropped a new series. You tell yourself, I'll go tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So what was the Nobel Trio's solution? They set up a randomized control trial dividing villages into 3 groups. Group 1, status quo. Group 2, reliability boost. Ensured the nurse was always at the center on time. Group 3, same as Group 2, but with a small nudge. Give every mother who brings their child for a shot 1 kilogram of lentils and a set of stainless steel plates upon completing the full course.
The results will floor you. In Group 2, vaccination rates went up a bit, but nothing crazy. But in Group 3, the vaccination rates skyrocketed 7-fold, reaching nearly 40%. A bag of lentils. Its value was less than $1. Why did something so cheap solve a problem that millions in propaganda failed to fix? Because 1 kilogram of lentils turned an abstract action, protecting future health, into an immediate tangible reward. It compensated for the opportunity cost of walking to the clinic. The mother thinks, if I go get the shot today, at least the family has lentil soup tonight. It's like Starbucks giving you a free coffee after 10 purchases, or Uber discounting your first ride. It is the art of behavioral manipulation applied to social welfare.
Do you know the craziest part? The cost per vaccinated child in the lentil group was actually cheaper than the group that got nothing. Sounds absurd? That's math. Because the health center was running at full capacity, the nurse wasn't sitting around doing nothing, so the fixed costs were spread over more people. Giving away gifts turned out to save the system money. At the same time, in Kenya, Michael Kremer, the third member of the trio, was doing something similar with education. Instead of building fancy schools or buying expensive textbooks, things politicians love to cut ribbons for, Kremer discovered that the cheapest, most effective way to increase school attendance was deworming. That's right, killing worms. Parasites in the stomach made kids tired, sick, and absent. A deworming pill costing pennies had a bigger impact on education than hiring extra teachers. That is the engine of the experimental method. Find the smallest bottlenecks, the micro glitches, and fix them with pragmatic, cheap solutions that have massive leverage.
They prove that poverty isn't destiny, and the poor aren't a burden. The problem is product design. If public policy is a product, it's a crappy one with terrible user experience, full of friction that prevents the customer, the citizen, from using it. Banerjee, Duflo, and Kremer are simply the world's best UX designers, redesigning the path out of poverty to have the least amount of friction. But this is where it gets scary. If the formula is this simple and effective, just lentils and deworming pills, why do superpowers, economic giants with massive machineries, keep failing in their macro policies? Why is China in trouble with its one-child policy aftermath, or the US struggling with an expensive but inefficient healthcare system? Why, when we scale this model up to a national level, does the system error appear and swallow all efforts? That is when we have to look at the bigger picture, where politics, power, and the blindness of giant institutions start to wreck these beautiful scientific principles.
If Banerjee and Duflo's method, small experiments, psychological nudges, cheap bags of lentils, is so effective, why is the world still burning?
Why does the US, with all the brainpower of the Ivy League, still have the most expensive healthcare system while life expectancy is dropping? Why is China facing massive ghost cities with not a soul in sight? Welcome to the global glitch. The problem lies in one word: scaling. When you move from a village of 500 people in India to a nation of 330 million like the US, you aren't just multiplying the numbers. You are entering a completely different matrix. At the micro level, the enemy is laziness or lack of information. But at the macro level, the enemy is a billion times more dangerous: ideology and politics. Look at the US. The US doesn't lack data. They're swimming in it. But look at how they handle education. No Child Left Behind, or later Common Core, are prime examples of failed big push thinking. Washington imposes a rigid set of standards for both a kid in the Bronx projects and a kid in wealthy Silicon Valley. They think education is a assembly line. Shove the same inputs in, get the same outputs out.
Banerjee and Duflo would call this intellectual laziness. American policymakers are obsessed with silver bullet solutions, one fix for everything. They refuse A/B testing for political reasons. A senator can't stand in front of voters and say, "I'm not sure if this policy works, so I'm going to test it on this state first, and if it sucks, I'll fix it." No, in American politics, admitting uncertainty is suicide. So, they roll out massive, unverified policies costing billions, and when they fail, they blame the other party instead of looking at the data. That's why college costs in the US have risen 169% since 1980, but graduate wages have stagnated. The system has a critical UX error, but no one dares to hit reset. Now, pivot to China. If the US is paralyzed by political conflict, China is trapped in the trap of its own top-down efficiency. Look at the real estate crisis with Evergrande at the center. For decades, local governments in China chased a single KPI: GDP growth.
What's the fastest way to boost GDP? Construction. Build bridges, build roads, build apartments. According to Big Push theory, infrastructure stimulates the economy. But they ignored the human part of Duflo's equation. They built ghost cities in Ordos or Tianjin, places with wide roads and skyscrapers, but nobody living there. Why? Because they didn't care about micro-demand. They didn't survey if people wanted to move there or if they could afford it. They only cared about hitting the quota from Beijing. This is a textbook example of ignoring micro-market signals to serve macro goals. The result is trillions of dollars in concrete rotting in the sun, while citizens still struggle with high housing prices in major cities. That is a colossal waste of resources that no bag of lentils can salvage. And don't forget the European Union with its Common Agricultural Policy, CAP. This is a bureaucratic money incinerator, subsidizing inefficient farms just to preserve cultural identity and votes instead of encouraging innovation. It creates mountains of butter and lakes of surplus milk, distorting the global market and hurting the very farmers in poorer countries trying to export produce.
The people in power don't suffer the direct consequences of their bad decisions. In Banerjee experiment, if you don't give lentils, vaccination rates stay low. The data shows up immediately, and the research team has to pivot. But in government, if a policy fails, the decision maker still gets their salary, still rides in a private car, and the consequences are pushed onto the taxpayers or future generations as public debt. The feedback loop has been severed. The world operates like a blind giant. We have powerful tools, finance, technology, but we lack the sharp eyes of the experimentalists. We prefer grand narratives over small, brutal, hard facts. So standing before this chaotic picture, where superpowers are stuck in quagmires of their own making, what do we, the little guys, do? Is there a lesson from this Nobel Prize that you can apply immediately to your wallet and your life so you don't get crushed by the system's faulty gears? The answer is yes, and it is ruthlessly pragmatic.
We've traveled a long way from dusty villages in India to the billion-dollar failures of superpowers. Now turn off the TV, close the laptop, and look at your wallet. The most important question right now is, how do I avoid becoming a victim of these macro illusions? Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Kramer didn't just teach us how to save the poor. They taught us how to think to survive and thrive in a world full of BS promises. Here are 3 blood and guts principles for you to apply immediately to your life and your portfolio.
Don't believe the vision, audit the unit economics. Remember the big push? In the investing world, that's the pitch deck that screams, "This tech will change the world, AI is the future, EVs are inevitable." It sounds good, but it's a trap. Just like donors pumping money into education without caring if the teacher shows up, amateur investors, F-Zeros, throw money at companies with a great story but rotten execution. The Nobel lesson: think micro. Don't ask how big the EV market will be in 2030, ask how many cents of profit do they make on each car sold? How much does it cost them to acquire one new customer? If the answer is they are losing money to grab market share, watch out. That could be another WeWork or Uber, burning investor cash to sustain a business model that is glitched at the micro level. If a model doesn't work at a small scale, one village, one customer, it will collapse when you scale it. Don't buy the dream, buy the money printing machine backed by data.
2. Hack your own behavior. Find your bag of lentils. We are all like those mothers in Udaipur. We know we need to save for retirement, need to exercise, need to learn new skills, but we procrastinate. Why? Because our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification. Don't try to use willpower. Willpower is the cheapest and most depletable resource. Use the nudge mechanism. Want to save money? Don't wait until the end of the month to stash cash. Set up an automatic transfer the second your paycheck hits. Make saving the default and spending the choice. Want to work more effectively? Don't just write goals on paper. Create a small, immediate reward, your bag of lentils. If I finish this report in 2 hours, I get to watch one episode of Netflix or grab a Starbucks. Design your life like a choice architect so that the right action becomes the easiest action. Don't trust your future self, bind your present self.
Think like a plumber, not a grand architect. Esther Duflo once said that economists should stop thinking of themselves as physicists solving the universe and think of themselves as plumbers. Plumbers don't draw flashy blueprints for skyscrapers. They crawl under the floorboards, find the leak, tighten the valve, change the washer. In your career, do the same. Don't try to offer sky-high strategies if you don't understand the ground-level details. The real value of an employee or a leader lies in the ability to spot tiny bottlenecks in the process and fix them. Why do customers drop off at the checkout page? Why does every meeting drag on for 2 hours and solve nothing? Economics isn't lifeless supply and demand curves on a blackboard. It is the study of blood, sweat, and irrational human decisions. The 2019 Nobel Prize wasn't just a victory for the experimental method, it was a reminder that the truth is always in the details. Next time you hear a politician promise a bright future or a CEO paint a picture of changing the world, squint your eyes, remember those mothers in India, and ask, where is the deworming pill? Where are the lentils? And let me see your data. Don't be fooled by the glitz, be a smart skeptic, because in this game of money and power, only data can save you.